Tonight, the attraction of the school lunch proves irresistible to the elderly. We look at why women aren't joining forces. And we say farewell to the longest-serving columnist on The Listener. Good evening. The former makers of Champion Rangers in Dunedin have begun shifting stock that was left on the plant when their factory closed. Late this afternoon, a truck crossed a picket of former employees of Stride Corporation and began loading out what's believed to be more than $1 million worth of electric Rangers. Mark Price reports.
The drivers' union had agreed not to cross the picket line, but an owner-operator was found to do the job, despite protests from about 20 of the 108 people who lost their jobs when the factory closed. The receivers say they need to get the assets sold so creditors can be paid the more than $4 million they're owed. Former employees of Stride Corporation have been picketing their old workplace since the day they lost their jobs and were given their holiday pay and a week's pay in lieu of notice. They believe they should also have got redundancy pay. They have a signed redundancy agreement with autocrat Sanyo that used to own the business. They have a letter from Stride Corporation that bought the business last winter saying Stride would honour the redundancy agreement. But Stride went into receivership in April of this year. The receivers tried to keep the business going until a fortnight ago when they pulled the plug. The receivers now believe they're not bound by the redundancy agreement.
Currently the matter's being heard by the Labour Court. If the Labour Court determines that it's preferential, then they will get paid in full. Otherwise, it's dependent on the realisation of the assets of the company, of which we're looking for the cooperation of all parties so that they can be done in an orderly fashion.
If the Labour Court finds that they are, as I said before, unsecured creditors, is there the money available to pay them?
That will depend on the realisations of the assets of the company.
And do you believe there are enough assets there to pay the redundancy?
That is very difficult to determine.
Mr Easton says he borrowed money personally to help fill workers' final pay packet. It appears workers' only hope is to win their case in the Labour Court. This morning they voted to continue their picket until that case is heard in a month or so.
We cannot trust them because they haven't honoured the agreement they freely made.
As things stand, Stride's debenture holders and secured creditors are likely to get their money back. Unless they win their case in court, the workers are expected to get nothing more than what they've already received.
Whitebait fans will be licking their lips with the season for the tiny fish, now almost 2 weeks old. It's come a month earlier than usual, and so far catches are less than spectacular. But that doesn't mean Southlanders will have to go without the delicacy, as Peter Cruikshank reports.
Southland rivers have been too high and dirty to yield really good catches, but regular whitebaiters have started to net a few in the past 3 days. Last year they were selling their surplus catch for $50 a kilogram. This year, though, there'll be pressure on prices from imported Chinese whitebait, selling in local fish shops at about half the price of the homegrown product.
I love it actually, I've had it before, I really enjoy it.
Could you tell the difference between foreign whitebait and local?
There's a slight difference, but it's not all that much.
The main reason we have had to resort to imported whitebait is, as I say, to get a continuity of supply, a reliable source of supply, and to get a price which is realistic and within the pocket of the average person.
Another change to Southland whitebaiting is the control of the fisheries being handed over from the Ministry of Fisheries to the Department of Conservation.
There's never enough manpower. We will be short-staffed, but there will be a regular presence on the river.
And nobody seemed to care that whitebait wasn't on the menu at a special lunch in Dunedin today. In return for putting on a meal for the community's elderly citizens, the Home Science departments at 9 Dunedin secondary schools got some brand new kitchen technology, new food processors. As Alan Baddock reports, the promotion by the city's electricity department and local businesses was designed to provide more contact between the schools and the community.
The invitation to lunch provided a showpiece for the culinary endeavours of the city's home science students. There were few specifications, except that they had to cater for at least 20 people. But most saw it as a call to show off what they could do, so out came all the tricks of years, or at least months, of training. Here at Taieri High, it was also the first public function they'd catered for in their stylish new home science unit. So everybody was under special orders to ensure things ran smoothly. The DCC Electricity Department and ZIP, who jointly set up the promotion, say the main aim was to help the schools out with new equipment. But doing things this way seemed a better idea than just giving it to them for nothing. And so the only question left is, did those involved think it was worthwhile?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I think it is too.
I like it. It's good.
Do you want to do it more often?
Yep.
It is a very good idea indeed. And it's nice to meet other people.
Just wondering, how much contact do you normally have with children of this age?
The children of this age. Let me have a look at them. I don't have a lot, but I'm very fond of young people. Very fond of young people. I give them a bit of advice sometimes.
Too right. Police chiefs in Otago and Southland would like more women in the ranks. There are 7 policewomen in Invercargill, 1 in Gore and 14 in Dunedin. But there aren't enough applying to join the force, as George Burke reports.
Deputy Commissioner John Jameson says he's unhappy with the imbalance between men and women police throughout the country. There are nearly 350 women in the service compared with 5,000 men. He says women are just not coming forward despite equal pay and promotion opportunities. He says he doesn't know the reason for the lack of women applicants, as the job offers excitement, interest and satisfaction. Dunedin's new community constable, Debbie Cochrane's been in the police for 4 years. She used to be a typist with the Justice Department before making the move into uniform. She spent the past couple of weeks getting to know her beat and the people on it. Debbie says she loves the job because every day is different, but there are some duties she doesn't look forward to.
The 3 jobs that I find the most difficult would be attending deaths, motor accidents or other, domestics. They're very difficult.
Husband and wife.
Yeah. They're quite demanding, and also informing next of kin of perhaps a death in the family. You know, we get if someone dies overseas or something like that, then we have to go and inform the next of kin, and that's probably the hardest job that we've got, I think, in my opinion.
And while she admits it's a male-dominated occupation, she sees policing as a team job, males and females doing their best to keep the peace.
No? Many jobs?
No, right this morning. What about working relationship with your colleagues? Because it is male-dominated, the police, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I really enjoy it. I've never had any problems. Obviously, people vary with their attitudes and personalities and things, but I really enjoy it.
You don't get a hard time from them?
Oh, no, not really, no. They joke and have me on, but I think once you've earned the respect, then you're just treated as an equal, and we do the same work, we go to the same jobs, and provided you do the work, then there's no problems. They're really good.
For 24-year-old Debbie, the police is the only job, despite some of the dangerous and unpleasant duties involved. And where else can a 19-year-old recruit command a starting wage of almost $36,000?
The New Zealand Listener's longest-serving reporter has lost his column. Invercargill's Arthur Cushen, who for 38 years has helped radio listeners to find out what's happening around the world on shortwave, has been told his monthly column is to end. He talked to Peter Cruikshank about his involvement in radio, which has put him in touch with people all over the world.
Arthur Cushen has been mapping the ever-changing global emissions of medium and shortwave radio transmitters for 40 years, since he lost sight as a young man. He has a prodigious memory and can picture the world's radio transmissions in his mind's eye. It's this knowledge he draws on to help others appreciate the wealth of knowledge that can be tapped. And he's not happy that his listener column is ending on the 3rd of September. Arthur Cushen writes for overseas publications, but the listener is for New Zealanders.
I feel it gives a lot of people a much more world a fierce consciousness than they have at the moment, and I'm lucky that my column has an address at the bottom, and of course we get tremendous feedback from people all over New Zealand asking all sorts of questions. So it is going to be a severance between the listener and myself and the information that I have here to give to them.
Arthur Cushen is one of the few who know how many people he reaches with his monthly column, as his office handles over 400 inquiries a year. He says it's particularly sad that the people who are resuming radio listening in their leisure will be disadvantaged.
Receivers are so simple these days with a keypad, just like a keypad telephone. There's no knowledge of the old dial necessary. We get a lot of people asking for a list of English broadcasts which we compile based on New Zealand listening conditions, and it's about some 20 countries which can be heard very well in New Zealand every day. They're finding the thrill of listening to Moscow or London or somewhere else in the world, instead of having to be sort of given the news as New Zealand radio stations and television wants them to hear. They're getting an unbiased look at world events.
Whether they're people who want to improve their French or Japanese language, Arthur Cushen and his part-time helpers always reply. He is going to notice a change and will have to reduce staff because his 50 inquiries a month will stop. Another major concern he has is for New Zealanders overseas who want to hear their own country's shortwave broadcast. They may not be able to do that soon. The New Zealand transmitters are 40 years old and are unlikely to be replaced. However, the BBC is keen to build a super shortwave transmitter in New Zealand to really cover the South Pacific.
We have had an approach from the BBC to share a broadcasting service here in New Zealand on shortwave with RNZ. That's our only hope for the future.
In his last column, Arthur Cushen's listener article is devoted to the history of Radio New Zealand's shortwave service, what it's done and where it's going. He, it seems, won't be going any further with the BCNZ's official publication.
It was dreadful weather today in some places, but that didn't worry Mary Insel. Mary was snug as usual inside her booth at the Moray Place car park. It was Mary's last day today after 20 years on duty. Grateful customers gave her flowers and gifts, and it looks like she's going to be sorely missed. Have a happy retirement, Mary. Now, today's temperatures, which never actually reached very great heights. Predicting a high of 9 degrees tomorrow for Invercargill, where it was showery and 6 today. In Dunedin, cloudy and 6 today, and predicting a high of 9 degrees tomorrow. Not looking so good, but we can say that the long-range forecast bodes well for the weekend. We're looking at fine and frosty conditions. Have a good night. We'll be back tomorrow. Good night.